Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Energy News Beat podcast. My name's Stu Turley, President and CEO of Sandstone Group. Today is a special treat because this is a joint podcast with David Blackmon on his The Energy Question. He and I have a few questions we're going to go through here. And I don't know about you, but I cannot wait for the Biden administration. It's not Joe Biden because he's not running the show. He doesn't even know if he has an ice cream in his pants or not. I guarantee you, David Blackmon is here today. Welcome, David. How are you?
Oh, just lovely, man. Happy to be here. Appreciate the invitation.
I'll tell you what, this is going out on both of our channels, and I just have really enjoyed all of your Substack, blackmon.substack.com, all of your interviews, all of your articles. You've just written a Forbes article. Tell us about your Forbes article, because this discussion is about the overreach of the Biden administration as he's walking out the door. Tell us what you got.
Yeah. So the piece I posted today at Forbes addresses Biden's massive offshore drilling ban that spans 625 million acres, which, by the way, folks, is 100 million acres more than the size of the Louisiana Purchase and 100 million acres bigger than the states of Texas and Alaska combined. Okay. That's how big this is. It's insane. It's insane. He's setting for into perpetuity, setting aside the entire Atlantic coast, the entire Pacific coast, the eastern third of the Gulf of Mexico, and most of the Bering Sea off of the North Slope of Alaska, off limits to exploring for what we know already without even doing much drilling is pretty sizable. And if you do any real exploration, there's no question, for example, that the massive energy oil resources of the North Slope extend into the Bering Sea. There's just no question about it.
Right.
And everyone knows it. And it's probably billions and billions of barrels of oil up there waiting to be explored. Russia is exploring their part of the Arctic, and we should be too, because we don't know how much longer oil and gas and coal are going to provide 80% of our primary energy needs in this world. We spent $30-40 trillion globally over the past 15 years trying to subsidize this transition into existence. And that number hasn't been reduced at all. There has been no transition despite all that spending, most of it funded with debt. And so we may be 50, 100 years from now, future generations of Americans may still need oil and gas to keep their houses warm and their air conditioning running and their cars going. We just don't know. So there's no reason to do this. It's a stupid move and on top of being a destructive move. And President Trump yesterday promised to unban it. So we'll see if he can do it.
Here's where I want to get into that question. There's two things. A, it stifles energy security. We're seeing pipelines and undersea cables cut all over the world right now. We're just seeing them. Taiwan just had their phone cables cut yesterday or Sunday. And so when you sit back and take a look, the Baltic Sea is just going nuts with all these cables and everything else. You and I have laughed about UK is now Norway is wanting to cut the interconnect because they're tired of giving away their green energy hydroelectric. And so it's about energy security. He is tubed our long-term energy security.
Yes. Yeah. Every move he's made in this administration for 4 years has had the impact of lessening America's energy security. Meaning start with his pillaging of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, cutting it to half its capacity, purely to try to impact the midterm elections. That was all that was about. And that's disgusting.
The Chevron Deference, you did such a great job covering that. A, there's a couple things that I like about you. A, you're a Texan. B, you've always said physics and fiscal responsibility matter to the grid. The grid does not care one way or the other. And when we sit back and take a look, if President Trump comes in, executive orders will only get you so far on two ways that Biden administration has just tubed our energy security. The EPA with Lee Zeldin coming in is going to be phenomenal. I'm trying to get him on a podcast, and I want you to ask some questions of him. And that is, when we sit back and go, regulatory issues and killing regulations. President Trump, I loved it when he got that $100 billion investor standing there and he goes, how about 2 billion? Hey, he pulled out his Guido and goes, hey, how about 2 billion? And I'm like, go Trump, go. But he's only going to be limited in the regulatory issues by being able to dismantle that. The Chevron deference that you covered is now in a year's process, and we've had all the Obama and Biden judges are going to hold that process up. How bad is this going to be through the legal regulatory issues? Does that make sense?
Well, it's going to be tough. I mean, it's always hard to rescind regulations. The ones that Biden's people made final over the last 6 months of 2024 can be repealed by Congress if you can get the votes in the House and Senate to do it. Simple majorities in both houses can rescind any regulation that went final over the last 6 months of the administration.
For my podcast, I'm holding my breath until I turn blue
And by the way, that's hundreds of regulations. In 2017, Congress, when Trump had majorities in both houses, did use that Congressional Review Act 20 some odd times, I think 24 times. So, right. I mean, it can be really a productive exercise to do that. And they implemented hundreds of awful regulations, dozens of which negatively impact energy security. So Congress should go after every one of them. But for those that went final prior to that period of time, you're going to have to go through the full regulatory process under the Administrative Procedures Act, which is very complex and time-consuming, can lead to a lot of litigation by these left-wing environmental groups who, the Biden administration has thrown billions of dollars into their coffers, these IRA subsidies that the Biden administration has just been, as the one EPA guy that was caught on hidden camera saying, throwing gold bars off the Titanic to these organizations, and they'll all file lawsuits. And that's what will happen when Trump tries to reverse Biden's ban. Is they'll file lawsuits and they'll have to go through the courts, and it's never been tested up to the Supreme Court. This provision in the offshore, Outer Continental Shelf Lands Act of 1953, right. Section 12, contains language that gives presidents the power to do these bans, but the clear intent of the language is that it be done only for military purposes or during times of national emergencies. It's clear what the congressional intent was, but it's never been tested all the way up to the Supreme Court, and several presidents have done these bans. Sadly, President Trump himself did one under this section in 2017 as a gift to 2019 because Rick Scott wanted it for offshore Florida. So, unfortunately, there's that precedent. But you're right that the Supreme Court's doing away with the Chevron deference can possibly make a difference, maybe not related to this since it's an executive order, but when you're talking about rescinding these regulations, most of them use that Chevron deference as a foundational basis, for being able to do those things. So over the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see a lot of court cases go up to Supreme Court challenging some of these awful regulatory actions, including the decision in 2007 by the Supreme Court that allows EPA to regulate carbon dioxide as a pollutant, which it clearly is not a pollutant. So all those things are now in jeopardy, but it's going to
take a game changer if they could get that one argued. Because last time I checked, my plants do better. And David, I just ordered when I got my backhoe this year. I have a backhoe now, and I'm I'm diverting all the water from my...
You're the only guy I know that owns his own backhoe.
Hey, I got to build a bunker. But one of the fun things is I'm also putting in a greenhouse and I'm putting in all these other things. But you sit back and take a look. When I ordered in my indoor seed thing, it came with instructions, and it was actually for growing pot. And I'm like, I'm not growing pot. But it said CO2 is plant food. So if you're if you're growing hemp, it's okay. If you're growing pot, it's okay to consider CO2 plant food. Every huge plant food thing is CO2 is good. And I don't get it. I understand CO2 is good for the plants. And I've enjoyed my conversations with Greg Wrightstone, who's over there at the head of the CO2 Coalition. And the man's brilliant. I agree with him.
His books are fantastic.
So when we sit back and take a look, President Trump has Doug Burgum. He has, you and I both have interviewed Chris Wright. Chris Wright is one of the coolest guys on the planet. And then you have Lee Zeldin. If Trump is going to keep his political commitment to cutting consumer energy by half in his first year, these three guys got about a minute in order to get that done.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. I don't know why Trump keeps saying that. I mean, you're really not going to be able to do that, but you are going to be able to greatly enhance U.S. energy security and our ability to wean ourselves off of foreign imports of energy. And, it's everything. And the other thing is to liberate our energy imports from supply chains controlled by China. I mean, that's
yes.
More than any other aspect of the damage the Biden administration has done is to render our country as a vassal state, basically, to China for our energy needs by, all of these minerals like lithium, like antimony, cobalt, tungsten. You just go down the list that we have to have for these batteries and solar panels and wind energy applications. They're all coming into our country on supply chains controlled by China. So
antimony is used in munitions as well, if I remember.
Oh, it's integral to tungsten steel and all sorts of military applications. Okay, and we're importing 80% of it currently. We finally got yesterday the final permit for a domestic antimony well out in Idaho, operated by Perpetua Resources. I wrote about that too.
I knew I would.
But that took 13 years just to get the permits, folks, and it's going to be another 3.5 years before the thing goes live. Okay, so you're talking 18 years to get one antimony mine going in the United States. That has to change. If you're really going to do this energy transition, which I don't think we're really going to do, but if you're really going to do it, you got to be able to start up a bunch of new mines.
There's no way the energy transition and net zero is a wealth transfer scheme. The energy transfer is not going to happen because you don't have a base load. Physics and fiscal responsibility matter. We've essentially killed nuclear because of the green lobbyists have done them in as well. Yep. And the green lobbyists don't realize that they would stand a better chance if they promoted nuclear as a baseline rather than natural gas. AI is not going to happen without.
Yes, they would care about that if their concern was the environment. Okay. But their concern is not the environment.
No.
All these green groups have sold out to the wind and solar industries and the electric vehicle companies. They get billions and billions of dollars in funding from those industries. They are just clients of those rent-seeking industries that have to have all these federal taxpayer subsidies because their business models don't work. And it's just a big, huge transfer of wealth. That's all that's happening here. So they don't give a damn about the environmentalists don't care about the environment anymore. Sierra Club is not an environmental organization. It's a wealth transfer organization.
I think the last true environmentalist was Dr. Patrick Moore when he was one of the co-founders. I love Dr. Patrick Moore. I've enjoyed my 2 podcasts with him. And when,
he was the Greenpeace founder, for those who don't know.
Yes, and he bailed out after it got hijacked. And what a great man. I loved him. I want to ask this. So we've got critical minerals that we need anyway. Donald Trump Jr. has just landed in Trump Force One in Greenland.
Yes.
And I got to admit, President Trump, I love you, and I think it's fantastic. I'd love to interview you someday. And having Donald Trump Jr. go to Greenland, even if it's for podcasts and pictures, is just way cool because the image of Trump Force One landing is a trolling move today.
I would love to see that.
We would treat Greenland better than Denmark because Denmark just takes everything out of it, gives them nothing. We would be able to really take and make that the 52nd state because I think it's going to be the 51st.
No, Canada's not going to be a state. I'd take Alberta, though. If we can just annex Alberta, that would be awesome.
Wouldn't that be great? I love Alberta. I
name it North Texas. Yes.
North Texas. Oh, man. man, wouldn't that be phenomenal? But, you got to hand it to President Trump for being a troll master. That man can troll. I've never seen, he can. And sometimes when he comes back around, I get infuriated for him saying something stupid, but it turns around 15 minutes later, and that something stupid triggered something else that was actually pretty good. So
Yeah.
I'm not going to play chess against President Trump or President Putin. Never in my life would I have expected to all of a sudden Putin being the guy that promoted Christianity and Russia first. Putin's not the bad guy in the
While
NATO.
Ukraine is destroying it. The Ukrainian government is destroying Christianity in their country.
And Putin, Brezhnev, and Reagan promised that NATO would never go any further. And so the pipeline mess in the EU is real, and it is a huge thing. Syria, David, just got its Assad tossed out because he did not put in a pipeline for the U.S. Go figure that one out. You heard it here.
Yeah, the one that's going to run from Qatar up to Bulgaria and then tie into the Russian pipeline system going into continental Europe. Yeah.
But it was going to be trading in the U.S. petrodollar, and it's now not.
Yeah.
Oops. I wonder who stopped that.
That probably was a big motivator of that, yes.
So when you sit back and take a look at that whole mess over there, energy security matters. Well, David, how do people find you?
Well, they find me it's very simple with me. My Substack, Energy Transition Absurdities. The address is blackmon.substack.com. I link to or post everything I write at all these other places. Like, I write for the Daily Caller. I write for Forbes and have written for Forbes for 13 years now. I write for World Oil Magazine and the Petroleum Economist and at my Substack. But everything gets linked into that Substack. And then I also run a political Substack. If you want to hear all my political wisdom and read it, it is davidblackmon.substack.com, and would love to see everyone there.
I'll tell you what, I really highly recommend your Substacks. I talk about all your articles all the time on our podcast, the Energy Newsbeat podcast.
Well, I have my own sources I steal from, like Tim Stuart at the U.S. Oil and Gas Association, for example.
Well, and I want to give a shout out to irinaslav.substack.com as well as Tammy Nemeth. They are also great participants in Energy Reality that you and I really am not worthy to be on that panel. And I'm
not either. I mean, they're two such incredibly smart and funny individuals. I mean, every time I read anything Irina writes, I just laugh constantly.
I stop whatever I'm doing and I turn on her read feature because she reads it in her Bulgarian accent. Yes. And I get my Irina fix anytime she puts it out there. So you got to go subscribe to her. And I'll tell you what, Tammy Nemeth is just a class act. She just kind of like me. You never know what country she's going to be in.
Well, that's right. But, we're really fortunate to be on email chains with them because both of them give me so many great references to absurdities to write about. Tammy is just a wealth of that kind of information.
Well, David, thank you very much. And we'll be putting this out on both of our channels. So thank you for stopping by the podcast.
It's always a pleasure, Stu. Keep up the great work, man.
Hey, thanks.
Building it.
I don't know about that.